"Sir, your mother is still alive. I saw her." The words slipped from Amina's trembling lips as the glass she was holding shattered across the marble floor. Across the room, Ismail Diallo froze, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. His mother had been buried 5 years ago. He had stood beside her coffin. He had watched the earth cover her. Yet the terror in Amina's eyes was not madness, it was certainty. "She was calling your name." "In that place," she whispered, shaking. The room fell into a suffocating silence as one impossible question rose between them. If she was alive, then who did Ismail bury? "Before we go on, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? If stories like this move, you don't forget to subscribe and be part of this journey." The house was too quiet for a place that large. Every footstep echoed against polished marble floors, every movement swallowed by high ceilings and glass walls that reflected back a life of success but not warmth. The Diallo mansion stood on one of Dakar's most exclusive hills, overlooking the ocean where the waves crashed endlessly, as if time itself refused to rest. Yet inside time felt frozen. Ismail Diallo had built everything with his own hands, or at least that was what the world believed. At 38, he was known across Senegal and beyond as a self-made billionaire, shipping real estate import-export. His name carried weight in boardrooms, government offices, and elite gatherings. Men respected him, women admired him, competitors feared him, but none of them knew the silence he lived with, because success had come with a cost he never spoke about. 5 years ago, his mother, Mama Aissatou Diallo, had died, or at least that was the truth he had accepted. Since then, the mansion had changed. The laughter that once filled its corridors was gone. The kitchen, once alive with the scent of her cooking, now smelled of nothing. Even the air felt colder, heavier, like something sacred had been removed and never replaced. Ismail rarely entered the east wing of the house anymore. That was where her room was. He had locked it himself. The staff had been instructed never to open it, never to clean it, never to disturb anything inside. It remained untouched, preserved like a shrine to a memory he couldn't face and couldn't let go of. And yet, despite everything, life had to continue, which was why 3 weeks ago, a new housemaid had arrived. Her name was Amina. She came from a small rural village outside Saint Louis, carrying a single worn bag and a quiet determination that didn't beg for attention. She was in her mid-20s, slender with deep brown skin and soft, observant eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. She spoke gently, moved carefully, worked tirelessly. Unlike the others, she didn't gossip. She didn't stare at the luxury around her with greed or awe. She simply did her job with a kind of quiet dignity that was almost unsettling. At first, Ismail barely noticed her. To him, staff came and went. Efficiency mattered more than identity. As long as the house ran smoothly, he had no reason to look closer. But Amina noticed him. Not the powerful businessman the world saw, but the man who walked through his own home like a stranger. She saw how he avoided certain hallways, how he paused just briefly when passing the locked door in the east wing, how sometimes late at night he would sit alone in the dimly lit living room, staring at nothing, a glass untouched in his hand. There was something broken there, something unfinished, and Amina, without fully understanding why, felt it. Days passed quietly, until the moment everything changed. It was a late afternoon sunlight pouring through the tall windows, casting long golden lines across the floor. Amina had been assigned to clean the main living room, a space filled with expensive furniture, abstract art, and carefully curated decor. It was a room designed to impress, but one object stood out from everything else: a framed photograph on a side table. At first, Amina almost ignored it. Just another family picture, she thought. But then she looked closer, and her hands stopped moving. The woman in the photo was older, wrapped in elegant traditional Senegalese attire. her head held high, her smile warm but strong. There was something deeply familiar about her face, something that sent a sudden chill through Amina's body. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered, stepping closer. She reached out slowly, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the glass frame. It couldn't be. Her mind raced, trying to reject what her eyes were seeing. But the memory came anyway. A dim corridor, the smell of antiseptic, a locked ward, and a woman sitting by the window, staring out with hollow, distant eyes. A woman who had grabbed Amina's wrist one day, suddenly, desperately, and whispered something that had stayed with her ever since. "Ismail." Amina staggered back slightly, her heart pounding. The same face, the same eyes, just older, weaker, broken. The glass slipped from her hand. It shattered against the marble floor with a sharp, violent crack that echoed through the entire room. Within seconds, footsteps approached. Ismail entered. His expression was already tight with irritation. But it shifted the moment he saw her. Amina stood frozen, her face pale, her body trembling as if she had seen something far worse than broken glass. "What happened?" he asked sharply. But she didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the photograph. Then slowly, she turned to him, and in that moment something changed. The air between them grew heavy. "Sir," her voice shook, barely holding together. Ismail frowned. "Yes," she swallowed hard. "That woman," she said, pointing at the photograph. "My mother," Ismail replied immediately, his tone cold, controlled. Why Amina's lips trembled. Her mind screamed at her to stay silent, to walk away, to forget, but the memory of that woman's voice, that desperate grip, refused to let her. "She's not dead." The words fell into the room like a stone into still water. Ismail didn't react immediately. For a second, it was as if his mind refused to process what he had just heard. Then, "What did you say?" His voice dropped, dangerously quiet. Amina took a step back, fear flashing across her face. I saw her," she whispered. "In a hospital, a mental hospital." The silence that followed was suffocating. Ismail stared at her. Not with confusion, not with curiosity, but with something far colder. Rage. "That's enough," he said sharply. "You don't know what you're saying." "I'm telling the truth," Amina insisted, her voice shaking but firm. "I worked there before I came here. Just for a short time. Cleaning. Helping the nurses." "Stop!" His tone cut through the air like a blade. She looked exactly like her. Amina continued, tears forming in her eyes. "And she called your name." That was the moment something cracked. Ismail stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming. "My mother is dead," he said, each word heavy with controlled anger. "I buried her. I saw her body. I stood there while they closed the coffin." Amina shook her head, trembling. "Then who did you bury?" she whispered. The question hung in the air, sharp, impossible, dangerous. For a brief second, something flickered in Ismail's eyes. Not belief, but something else. Doubt. It disappeared just as quickly. "You're mistaken," he said, stepping back. "Or worse, you're lying." "I'm not lying," Amina cried, her voice breaking. There was a scar on her left arm just here. She gestured, her hand shaking like a burn mark. "I remember because I saw it when the nurse was changing her clothes." Silence. This time it was different. He didn't interrupt her, didn't dismiss her immediately. Because that detail, that scar. No one outside the family knew about it. Ismail's jaw tightened. "How would you know that?" he asked slowly. Amina's voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I saw her. Up close." The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. Something invisible had shifted. And for the first time in 5 years, Ismail Diallo wasn't completely certain of the truth he had been living with. The silence did not break. It stretched between them, thick and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The broken glass still lay scattered across the marble floor, catching fragments of sunlight, but neither of them moved to clean it. Ismail stood still, his eyes fixed on Amina. Not in anger anymore. Not entirely. Something deeper had taken its place. A calculation. A quiet, dangerous attempt to understand whether what stood before him was madness or truth. "You need to be very careful with what you're saying," he said at last, his voice low and controlled, each word measured. "Because if this is some kind of story to gain attention, or worse, to manipulate me." "It's not," Amina cut in, her voice trembling but urgent. "I didn't even know who you were when I saw her. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything. I only remembered her face, and the way she looked at me." Ismail's expression hardened slightly. "Then explain," he said. "Explain how a dead woman is suddenly alive in your story." Amina swallowed her fingers, twisting together as if trying to hold herself steady. "I didn't think anything of it at first," she began slowly. "At the hospital there were many patients. Some talked, some didn't. Some just sat there staring at nothing all day. It wasn't unusual." Her eyes drifted slightly as if she were seeing something far away. But she was different. Ismail didn't interrupt. "Not this time. She didn't scream," Amina continued. "She didn't wander like the others. She just sat by the window, every single day, quiet, watching." Her voice softened, like she was waiting. The words hung in the air. Waiting. For what? For who? Ismail's jaw clenched slightly, but he said nothing. "I only noticed her because of her clothes," Amina went on. "Even in that place, she carried herself with dignity. The way she sat, the way she held her head, it didn't match the others." "And that makes you think she's my mother?" Ismail asked, though. His tone lacked its earlier sharpness. "No," Amina said, shaking her head. "That's not why." She took a breath. "One day, I was cleaning near her room. The nurse had just left. I thought she was asleep." Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. But suddenly, she grabbed my wrist. Ismail's eyes flickered, just slightly. "She was stronger than she looked," Amina said. "Her grip, it shocked me. I tried to pull away, but she held on." "What did she say?" Ismail asked, before he could stop himself. Amina looked at him. Really, looked at him, and in her eyes there was no doubt. "She said your name." The words landed softly, but they struck like thunder. Ismail's breath paused just for a second. "That means nothing," he said quickly, too quickly. "Ismail is a common name." Amina shook her head again. "No, not like that." She stepped closer as if needing him to understand. She didn't just say it. She whispered it like it was the only thing she had left. Her voice broke slightly. "Ismail, my son." The room fell into a deeper silence. "If possible." Ismail turned away abruptly, walking a few steps toward the window, his back now facing her. The ocean stretched out in front of him, vast and endless, but for the first time in years, it did nothing to calm him. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You're building meaning out of coincidence." Amina didn't respond immediately. Instead, she wiped her eyes and steadied herself. "I thought so too," she admitted. "At first, Ismail didn't turn back, but then I saw her arm. That made him pause, not visibly, but something inside him shifted. She was wearing a loose hospital gown," Amina continued. "It slipped slightly when she moved, and that's when I saw it." Her hand lifted slowly, mirroring the exact spot. A scar, burned into the skin, faded, but still there. Ismail's fingers tightened slightly at his sides. She kept touching it. Amina said softly, like she remembered something painful. He closed his eyes briefly, just for a moment, because he remembered that scar. He had been a child, A cooking accident in the kitchen, oil spilling, his mother shielding him, taking the burn instead. It was something they never spoke about again, but it had stayed. Always. No one outside the family knew. No one. "How long were you at that hospital?" Ismail asked suddenly, his voice quieter now. "A few months," Amina replied. "I left because something didn't feel right." That made him turn. "What do you mean?" Amina hesitated, then spoke carefully. "There were areas we weren't allowed to enter," she said. "Locked sections, patients we were told not to look at, not to speak to. And this woman," Ismail asked. "She was in one of those sections," Amina said. "But sometimes they moved her, briefly, when they thought no one was watching." A chill passed through the room. Why would they hide? A patient, Ismail asked, more to himself than to her. Amina didn't answer immediately, because she didn't know, but she felt it. Something wrong, something deliberate. "I don't know," she said finally. "But I know what I saw." She took another step closer. "I wouldn't have said anything," she added quietly. "Even after I came here, I didn't think it mattered." Her voice trembled again. "But when I saw that photo, I couldn't stay silent." Ismail stared at her, longer this time, searching for something, a crack, a lie, a reason to dismiss everything she had just said. But there was none, only fear and truth, or something that looked dangerously like it. "You're asking me to believe that my mother, who was declared dead buried, mourned is somehow alive in a mental institution," he said slowly. "I'm asking you to consider it," Amina replied. He let out a dry, humorless breath. "Do you understand what that means?" "Yes," she said softly. "It means everything I know is wrong. I know. It means someone lied." Her silence confirmed it. "It means—" He stopped, his voice tightening. "Someone replaced her." The words felt unreal, even as he said them. But once spoken, they couldn't be taken back. Amina didn't move, didn't speak, because now it was no longer her story. It was his. And something inside Ismail Diallo was beginning to shift. Slowly, reluctantly, but undeniably. Doubt had entered, and doubt, once planted, does not leave easily. He walked back toward the table, his eyes falling on the photograph. Mama Isa too, smiling, alive, or at least, she had been. He picked up the frame, carefully ignoring the broken glass beneath his feet. For 5 years this image had been his closure, his certainty, his truth. Now, it felt like a question. He turned back to Amina. "If you're wrong," he said quietly, "there will be consequences." "I understand," she replied. "And if you're right." He didn't finish the sentence, because neither of them knew what came after that. The air between them shifted again, not with fear this time, but with something heavier, something inevitable. "What was the name of that hospital?" Ismail asked. Amina hesitated for a brief moment, then answered, "St. Mary's Psychiatric Center, on the outskirts, past Rufisk." Ismail nodded slowly. The decision was already forming, not fully, not consciously, but it was there. And once it took shape, there would be no turning back. That night, Ismail did not sleep. He lay in the darkness of his enormous bedroom, staring at the ceiling while the city lights from Dakar flickered faintly through the curtains. The room was cool, quiet, and perfectly arranged, but his mind was neither cool nor quiet. Amina's words had settled into him, like a splinter under the skin, small, hidden, and impossible to ignore. "She's not dead." He turned onto his side, then onto his back again. It made no difference. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photograph in the living room. Then he saw a hospital corridor he had never visited. Then, against reason, against memory, against the order of everything he believed, he saw his mother sitting in some locked room, waiting. At 2:30 in the morning, he finally rose from bed. Barefoot, in a white shirt and dark trousers, he left his room and walked through the sleeping house. The servants' quarters were silent. The kitchen was dark. The only sound was the distant hum of the sea and the soft ticking of the grandfather clock near the main staircase. He stopped at the east wing. For 5 years that corridor had felt forbidden, as if grief itself had sealed it. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the locked door of his mother's room. His hand hovered above the brass handle, then dropped. He turned away, walked to the study, opened a drawer, and took out the old key ring he had not touched in years. When he returned, his fingers felt strangely stiff. The lock resisted at first, as if even metal could remember sorrow. Then it gave way with a soft, tired click. The smell reached him before the sight did. Not decay, not neglect. Something softer. Faint perfume, old wood, pressed fabric, and time. The room had remained exactly as he had left it. The curtains were drawn halfway. Her reading glasses still rested on the bedside table, beside a small devotional book. A folded shawl lay across the arm of her chair. On the dresser stood a silver hairbrush, a bottle of shea oil, and a framed photo of him at 17, sullen-faced in a school uniform, while his mother smiled beside him with patient pride. Ismail stepped inside slowly, as if afraid the room might break. His chest tightened. Mama Aisatu had not been an ordinary woman. Even before he became wealthy, people treated her with a respect that had little to do with money. She had carried poverty without surrendering to it, widowhood without bitterness, and motherhood without making it look heroic. When his father died, she had sold jewelry, cooked for neighbors, negotiated with debt collectors, and kept her head high through every humiliation the world offered a woman alone. She had raised him with firmness and tenderness in equal measure. But in his final years with her, things had changed. Not suddenly. That was what troubled him now. Slowly. So slowly that he had never stopped to name it. He moved toward her dressing table and opened the top drawer. Inside were neatly folded scarves, small handwritten notes, and a leather-bound notebook he recognized but had never read. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The early pages were ordinary. Grocery lists, prayer reminders, names of women from her community association, fragments of recipes, a short note about paying school fees for a cousin's daughter. Then the tone shifted. The writing became less steady. Not wild or confused, just heavier. I do not trust Bako with the papers. Ismail's breath caught. He turned the page. He speaks sweetly in front of my son, but his eyes are restless. Another page. He says I worry too much. But why is he always asking what I have signed? Ismail lowered the notebook into his lap. Bako, his mother's younger brother-in-law, though, in African families, names like uncle, brother, and elder did not always follow strict bloodlines. Chief Bako Diallo had been present in their lives for more than 20 years. He was not poor, but he was not in Ismail's class either. He had once managed a transport company that failed, then attached himself to family businesses, always useful, always available, always loyal, or so it had seemed. After Mama Aisatu's death, Bako had stepped in during the mourning days, handling logistics, lawyers, burial arrangements, condolence, visitors' paperwork. Ismail had been drowning in shock, and Bako had become the man who helped. He remembered, feeling grateful. Now that memory tasted bitter. He kept reading. The final entries were sparse and unsettling. I feel watched in my own home. The doctor says it is stress, but I know the difference between sadness and being made to doubt my own mind. If anything happens to me, may God protect Ismail from those who smile with dry hearts. He stopped. A coldness spread slowly through his body. Those words did not prove anything. Not legally, not rationally. They were suspicions, fears, fragments. But they did something worse than proof. They connected. Amina's story, the hidden scar, the locked coffin. He closed the notebook and pressed both hands over his face. And then, against his will, memory returned, not gently, not in order but like broken pieces suddenly turning sharp. His mother's funeral had happened quickly. Too quickly. That had been explained as necessity. The doctor had said her condition had worsened dramatically. There had been distress, confusion, and concern about preserving dignity. By the time Ismail returned from a business trip in Abidjan, she was already gone. He had arrived home to weeping women, hushed prayers, and Chief Bako at the center of everything. He remembered asking to see her. Bako had put a hand on his shoulder and said softly, "My son, do not keep that image in your heart. Let your final memory be of her smile." The family imam had agreed that sometimes the dead should be allowed their peace. He remembered the coffin, closed. He remembered the burial, fast. He remembered his own numbness, so complete that he could barely think, barely stand, barely breathe. At the time, grief had made obedience feel easier than questioning. Now, for the first time, that obedience looked like blindness. The next morning, Ismail came down later than usual, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed by a night without rest. Amina was setting tea in the breakfast room when he entered. She glanced up, then quickly lowered her eyes, unsure of what he carried into the room. He sat without speaking. She poured his tea quietly. For a few moments only the faint clink of porcelain could be heard. Then Ismail said, "When did you leave St. Mary's?" Amina looked up at once. "About 6 months ago, sir." "Why exactly?" She hesitated. "Because it frightened me." He lifted his gaze. "In what way?" Amina folded her hands together. Some patients were treated as if they were people. Others were treated as if they were secrets. That answer stayed in the air. "Did you tell anyone what you saw?" he asked. "No." "Why not?" "Who would believe me?" she said honestly. "I was poor. Temporary staff. I had no proof." Ismail nodded once. It was not agreement. It was recognition. Then he said, "My mother's funeral happened with a closed coffin." Amina did not respond. She sensed that he was not speaking to her now, but to the part of himself that had refused to question. She was said to be too disfigured by illness, he went on. The explanation seemed merciful at the time. He paused. "Now I think mercy may have been used to hide something." Amina looked at him carefully. "Do you believe me?" He leaned back slightly, his face unreadable. "I believe," he said slowly, "that too many things no longer fit together." The words were quiet, but they changed everything. Because until that moment, Amina had been alone with what she knew. Now Ismail had stepped into the uncertainty with her, and once a man like him began to doubt, he did not do it halfway. He finished his tea without tasting it. Then he stood. "Say nothing to anyone," he told her. "Not to the cook, not to the guards, not to the driver. No one." "Yes, sir." He turned toward the doorway, then stopped. "And Amina." "Yes, if what you said is true," he said without looking back. "Then my mother did not die 5 years ago." His voice dropped lower. She was taken. The room seemed to darken around the sentence. He walked away, but the weight of those words remained behind like thunder before a storm. By midday, Ismail Diallo had made his first private call. Not to the police, not to family, not to the press. To an old contact in the Ministry of Health. And for the first time in 5 years, grief was no longer the heaviest thing in his chest. Suspicion was. By evening, the first answers began to arrive. But they were not answers in the way Ismail had hoped. They were gaps, delays, formalities. The kind of bureaucratic resistance that often appeared when something simple was being made intentionally difficult. His contact at the Ministry of Health, an older administrator named Mamadou Faye, had promised to look into the matter discreetly. 2 hours later, he called back with a tone so cautious that it immediately sharpened Ismail's attention. "St. Mary's has records," Mamadou said over the phone, his voice lowered. "But access is restricted. The system notes a privately sponsored ward extension that does not fall under ordinary public review." "Privately sponsored by whom?" Ismail asked. There was a pause. The donor records are incomplete. Incomplete, Ismail repeated coldly, or hidden Mamadou gave a small uneasy laugh that carried no humor. My friend, at our age, you know those can mean the same thing. Ismail stood at the long windows of his study, looking out at the darkening sea. Below, the garden lights had come on, throwing soft amber pools across the stone paths. Behind him, the room smelled of leather cedar and old paperwork. Everything in that space obeyed order. Numbers made sense, contracts made sense, ownership made sense. This did not. What else, he asked. There is a patient file matching the age range you asked about. Female, approximately mid-60s, admitted under the name Mariam Ba. That meant nothing to him, but his body still tensed. She has no listed relatives, Mamadou continued. No visitors, long-term stay, payments, routed through a private trust. Can you send me the file? Another pause. I can send you what the system shows, but it won't be complete. That's fine. It's not fine, Mamadou said quietly. Ismail, there's something odd here. The admission paperwork begins only 4 years and 8 months ago. That means either the earlier records were archived elsewhere or erased. The exactness of that time frame struck him. His mother had died 5 years ago, not 4 years and 8 months. A narrow window, a transfer, a delay, a cover-up. Send everything, Ismail said. When the call ended, he remained still for a few moments, his hand tightening around the phone. Then he turned toward his desk, just as Amina appeared at the doorway. She had knocked softly, but he had been too deep in thought to hear it. "Sir," she said carefully, "you asked me to bring tea." He looked at her, noticing again the quiet steadiness in her face. She was still afraid of him, still careful not to overstep, but something had changed since yesterday. There was less uncertainty in the way she held herself. Not confidence exactly, more like conviction. She set the tray down gently. "Thank you," he said. The words surprised both of them. Amina glanced up briefly, then lowered her gaze again. "Did you find anything?" He did not answer at once. Instead, he pulled out the chair opposite his desk and gestured for her to sit. She hesitated. "Sit," he repeated, not harshly. Slowly, Amina obeyed. "There is a patient," he said, "an older woman, admitted under a false name. No family listed. Payments hidden through a private trust." Amina's hands tightened in her lap. "So she's there," maybe Ismail said. "Not enough yet." He opened his laptop as the ministry documents came through. The scanned file was thin, far too thin. A basic admission summary, sedation history, psychiatric notes that seemed copied from a template, limited behavioral observations, and then a patient profile page. Name, Mariam Ba, age 64, next of kin, none. Condition, chronic confusion, paranoid fixation, disorientation. Special instruction, restricted contact, minimal stimulus, supervised handling only. Ismail's mouth hardened. "This is garbage," he muttered. He enlarged the final page. There, attached in a grainy black and white intake photo, was an older woman seated against a blank wall. The image quality was poor. Her face was thinner than in the photograph at home. Her headscarf was different. Her posture was collapsed in a way that felt profoundly wrong, but the eyes even blurred, even hollow. The eyes made Amina inhale sharply. "That's her," she whispered. Ismail said nothing. His heartbeat had changed. Not faster, harder. Each beat seemed to land deeper inside his body, as though something ancient and brutal had awakened in him. He leaned closer to the screen. The woman's left sleeve had slipped slightly, and there, like a fading shadow on the forearm, was the edge of a scar. He closed the laptop, not because he had seen enough, because he could not bear one more second of looking without acting. Amina watched him in silence. She could feel the anger moving through him now, but it was not loud anger. It was the kind that went inward, first becoming control. "Sir," she began. He lifted a hand, slightly stopping her. Then he asked, "When you were at St. Mary's, who controlled that hidden ward?" Amina thought carefully. There was a matron named Sister Clarice. Strict, cold, and a male administrator who came only at night sometimes. I never knew his real position. Everyone acted nervous around him. Could you identify him? If I saw him again, maybe. Ismail nodded slowly. That mattered. He reopened the file and scanned the payment routing details. Most of it had been blacked out electronically. But whoever had prepared the partial release had missed one line near the bottom: disbursement authorized through KD Family Welfare Trust. KD. At first, it could have meant anything. But then, memory clicked into place. Years ago, before his company expanded internationally, some older family holdings had been managed under abbreviations tied to his late grandfather's name, Karim Diallo. KD. His chest turned cold. Chief Bako had overseen those legacy structures after the funeral. Amina saw his expression change. "What is it?" He looked up, his face set. "I think the money came from my family." The words seemed to hollow out the room. Amina's lips parted, but no sound came. Because if that was true, then this was not some random institutional cruelty. It was intimate, organized, paid for, sustained. Someone had not only hidden Mama Aissatou, someone had funded her disappearance for years. And now, both of them were thinking the same name, Bako. But Ismail was not yet ready to say it aloud. Not because he doubted it, but because naming a betrayal too early could make it feel less survivable. Instead, he stood and began pacing. His mind moved with ruthless speed, now sorting details he had previously ignored. The funeral arrangements Bako had rushed, the insistence on a closed coffin, the legal transitions executed within weeks. The way Bako had always presented himself as protective, helpful, almost fatherly in the months after the burial. Even the sympathy visits, even the soft voice, even the hand on his shoulder, a performance, or worse, a cover. And beneath all of that, something even uglier began rising in Ismail's mind. What if his mother had tried to warn him? What if her increasing anxiety, her suspicions, her insistence that documents were being handled without transparency had not been stress at all? What if they had called her unstable because they needed to? He stopped pacing. "Amina," he said. "Yes, sir. Tell me exactly what she was like." Amina frowned slightly. "At the hospital, yes. Everything you remember." Amina drew a breath. She was quiet most days. Very quiet, but not empty. She searched for the right words. It was like she was drugged, not mad. Sometimes when the medication was stronger, she could barely lift her head. But on some mornings before the rounds, she became clearer. Clear. How? She looked around as if she was trying to place where she was, Amina said. Once she asked what day it was. Once she asked if someone had called for her. And once. Amina swallowed, then continued. Once she said, "They want my son to think I disappeared into shame." Ismail went completely still. The sentence struck him deeper than the photograph had, because that sounded like her. The dignity, the fear, the concern not for herself but for what lie was being told around her. Amina lowered her voice. "I never forgot it." He turned away from her again, staring out at the dark garden. He had spent 5 years mourning a dead woman. But perhaps she had spent those same years enduring something worse than death, a living erasure. Not only stolen from him, silenced, discredited, buried while breathing. A knock sounded at the study door. It was one of the senior house staff, old Ibrahim, bowing slightly. Sir Chief Bako called. "He says he would like to visit tomorrow morning." The words fell like a knife laid carefully on a table. Ismail's face did not change. Did he say why no, sir? Of course not. Because men like Bako rarely announce danger. They arrived carrying concern. Tell him I will be home, Ismail said. Ibrahim nodded and withdrew. When the door closed, Amina looked at him with open alarm. Do you think he knows? Ismail's answer came after only a second. Not yet, but his eyes had gone colder than before. Still, he said, from this moment, we assume he soon will. He moved back to the desk, opened a secure drawer, and removed a small recorder, a notepad, and a second phone he used only for sensitive business matters. Everything in him had changed now. Grief had brought him to the edge of truth, but strategy would be required to survive it. Tomorrow, he said quietly. I begin by listening. Then his gaze lifted to Amina. And after that, I go to St. Mary's myself. Chief Ismail Diallo arrived the next morning dressed in soft authority. He wore an expensive cream-colored boubou with gold embroidery at the collar, polished leather sandals, and the calm expression of a man who had spent years mastering the art of entering rooms as if he already belonged at the center of them. He was in his early 60s, now broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, with a face that still carried the charm that had once made people trust him, before they had any reason to. When Ibrahim ushered him into the breakfast room, Ismail was already seated. Amina had laid out the tea service and withdrawn, but not far. From the adjoining pantry doorway, she could hear enough to know that every word that morning mattered. Ismail, my son Bako, said warmly, opening his arms slightly as if affection were the most natural thing in the world. You have been difficult to reach. I've been working, Ismail replied. Bako took his seat across from him, without waiting to be invited. That is exactly the problem. A man can build an empire and still forget to rest. The line would once have sounded caring. This morning, it sounded rehearsed. Ismail poured tea for both of them with steady hands. Bako watched him for a moment, then smiled faintly. You look tired. I didn't sleep much. Business trouble. Family thoughts, Ismail said. That answer caused the smallest pause. Just a breath. But Ismail saw it. Bako recovered at once. That happens at times like these. Your mother's remembrance date is close again, isn't it? The mention landed deliberately like bait, set in still water. Ismail lifted his cup. You remember the date? Of course I do, Bako said softly. She was family. The word was lingered. For one dangerous instant, Ismail wanted to reach across the table, grab the old man by the collar, and demand every truth at once. But rage was a luxury. He needed information more than release. So he sat back, and yet, Ismail said, there are many things about that period I barely remember clearly. Bako sighed with practiced sorrow. Grief distorts memory. Does it? Yes. Bako lifted his own tea but did not drink. You were in terrible pain. I worried about you deeply. Ismail nodded once. You were very involved in the funeral. I had to be. You were not in a state to manage it. This too was true. That was the problem with dangerous men. They rarely built their lives from nothing. They layered them over moments that had once been real. I've been thinking about that, Ismail said. About how quickly everything happened. Bako lowered his cup. In our faith, burial is not delayed unnecessarily. Yes, Ismail said. But still, I never saw her face. There it was. The first true blade. Bako's gaze did not flicker. You asked to. I advised against it. Why for mercy? Mercy, for whom? Now a faint change appeared in Bako's eyes. Not fear, not yet. Annoyance. You are asking old questions as if they are new, Bako said. What is this really about? Ismail held his gaze. Indulge me. Bako leaned back slowly. The doctor said her final condition had altered her appearance. There was swelling, distress. I believed it better for you to remember your mother with dignity. My mother valued truth more than appearances. Bako's expression cooled by a degree. Are you accusing me of something I'm asking? Ismail said quietly, why I was protected from the truth. Silence fell between them. In the pantry doorway, Amina pressed one hand against her chest. She could not see their faces clearly from where she stood, but she could feel the temperature of the room changing. Bako set down his cup with care. "Who has been speaking into your ear?" It was not a denial. That struck Ismail immediately. Not "what are you talking about?" Not "why would you ask such a thing?" but "who has been speaking to you?" A man already calculating the leak. "No one," Ismail said. Bako smiled faintly. "You were not like this yesterday. You don't know what I was like yesterday. I know you." Bako's tone thickened slightly. "I have known you since you were a thin boy in school shoes too large for your feet. I stood beside your mother when your father died. I stood beside you when she died too, so do not sit there and behave as if I am some stranger to your house." The words were almost offensive in how skillfully they borrowed intimacy. And against his will, memory rose. There had been a time when Ismail truly loved the man. Not like a father, never that, but like one of those complicated African uncles who moved in and out of childhood, with a mixture of authority, humor, and usefulness. Bako had brought sweets when money was tight. He had once repaired a broken fan in their old house himself, laughing while Mama Isatu scolded him for pretending to be a handyman. At aid gatherings, he had lifted Ismail onto his shoulders when he was too small to see over the crowd. When teenage arrogance had made Ismail difficult, Bako had known how to speak to him without humiliating him. All of that had existed. That was what made betrayal so violent. It did not erase what had been real. It corrupted it. And there had been warning signs too, if he was honest. Even then, Bako had always hovered too close when documents were discussed. He liked access. He liked intermediacy. He liked being useful in ways that kept him near power. When Ismail's businesses began to grow, Bako praised him loudly in public, but often used private moments to ask questions that were less admiring than measuring. Who held which shares? What was in his mother's name? What would happen if inheritance structures changed? At the time, those had seemed like the ordinary concerns of an older relative who believed himself practical. Now sitting across from him in the bright Dakar morning, Ismail saw those conversations differently. He saw hunger where he had once seen concern. "I remember many things," Ismail said. Bako studied him, then more softly. "You have always been emotional where your mother is concerned." That almost made Ismail laugh. Emotional, as though love for the woman who built him was some weakness to be managed. "Yes," Ismail said. "I am." Bako nodded as though he had made a reasonable point. Then, "Do not let old grief make you suspicious of loyal people." There, again. Not confusion, not innocence, a steering attempt, a redirection. Amina from the pantry heard it too, and in that moment she understood something she had not fully understood before. Bako was not dangerous because he shouted. He was dangerous because he never needed to. He moved conversations as a man moves furniture quietly, until others no longer noticed what had changed. In the breakfast room, Ismail changed direction suddenly. "How are the legacy trusts performing?" he asked. This time Bako did blink. "Why, I was reviewing older family structures last night." Bako's mouth relaxed into a smile, but his shoulders grew tighter. "You have accountants for that. Answer me. They are stable. Who currently authorizes secondary disbursements? A beat passed." Ismail Bako said with light amusement. "What is this? An audit over breakfast? Who authorizes them?" Bako's face settled. "Some require co-signing through the family office. Under your supervision." "Yes." A pause. "As you requested after the funeral." That was technically true. In his grief, Ismail had signed broad temporary authority, so routine matters would continue without his direct involvement. He had revoked parts of it later, but not all. The older trusts, small, dusty, inherited structures, had remained under looser family administration. because they seemed unimportant, or because he had never looked closely. Temporary authority, Ismail said. At the time, yes. And now Bako spread his hands slightly. Now I continue where needed for efficiency. The recorder hidden beneath the sideboard flower arrangement captured every word. Ismail did not look toward it. He only asked, would those trusts permit long-term private institutional payments? Bako's stillness became absolute. Amina, though. She could not see his face, felt the answer before he spoke. In theory, Bako said carefully, many things are permitted under welfare classifications, medical support, family discretion, emergency care, even without beneficiary visibility. That depends on the arrangement, who arranged them. Now Bako's eyes hardened fully for the first time. Enough, he said. The softness had dropped from his voice. Not much, just enough. Ismail leaned forward slightly. You seem uncomfortable, and you seem manipulated. By whom, you tell me? The two men held each other's gaze. Outside somewhere in the gardens, a bird called once, then fell silent. At last, Bako stood. This conversation is beneath both of us, he said, adjusting the folds of his robe. If someone in this house is feeding you poison, remove them quickly. From the pantry, Amina went cold. Bako had not seen her, but somehow the words still felt aimed at her throat. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway and looked back. When grief is old, Ismail, it can make a man desperate for miracles. His expression was gentle again. Too gentle. Be careful what ghosts you chase. Then he left. The room remained quiet long after the sound of his steps faded. Amina emerged slowly, her face pale. He knows. Ismail did not answer immediately. He was staring at the doorway with such intensity that it seemed he could still see the shape Bako had left behind. Finally, he said, He suspects. That's worse. No, Ismail said, standing. It means he's rattled. He walked to the sideboard, lifted the vase, and removed the recorder. Amina stared. You recorded him. Yes. Did he confess? No. He slipped the device into his pocket. But innocent men ask what you mean. Guilty men ask who told you. Amina felt a shiver pass through her. What do we do now? Ismail turned toward the window, the ocean bright in the distance, his jaw set with a resolve that had deepened overnight into something harder than grief. Now he said, I stopped guessing. He looked at her. Today we go to St. Mary's. They did not leave in one of Ismail's usual cars. That was his first decision. His black armored SUV was too recognizable, too tied to the world that moved around him like a warning bell before he ever arrived. If Chief Bako had even a small network of eyes around Dakar, and Ismail now assumed he did, then driving openly to St. Mary's Psychiatric Center would be the same as announcing their intentions before they reached the gate. So just after noon, Ismail changed into plain clothes for the first time in months. Dark trousers, a simple linen shirt, no watch that flashed wealth, no driver, no security escort. He borrowed an older gray sedan from one of his company's secondary offices and parked it in the back of the estate before bringing it around himself. Amina stood waiting near the service entrance, wearing a faded blue wrapper and headscarf instead of her work uniform. She carried a cloth bag over one shoulder and looked like any other young woman from the outskirts traveling to visit a sick relative. But beneath the disguise, tension ran through her like a wire. She had not been back to St. Mary's since the day she left, and even now sitting in the passenger seat as Ismail drove them out of Dakar, she could feel memories she did not want rising one by one. For the first half hour, neither of them spoke much. Traffic thinned as the city loosened its grip around them. Concrete gave way to dusty roadside stalls, low walls, half-finished buildings, patches of scrub and stretches of open road where the heat shimmered above the ground. The farther they drove, the more the air changed, less salt, more dust, the kind of dry silence that made every distant sound feel suspicious. At last, Ismail said, "Tell me everything I should expect before we get there." Amina kept her eyes on the road ahead. "The hospital sits behind a high outer wall," she said quietly. "The public side looks normal enough. Visitor's office, general ward, administrative building. People come and go there. And the hidden ward." She swallowed. "It's farther back, behind the laundry block and the old chapel. There's another fence inside and a locked corridor. Most people pretend that part does not exist. How many staff know about it? Enough to keep it running," she said. "But not everyone asks questions. Some people just do their shift and go home." Ismail nodded once, and Sister Clarice Amina's mouth tightened. "She controls access on the inside. She acts like a nun, speaks softly, but nothing moves without her knowing." He glanced at her briefly. "You're afraid of her." Amina gave a brittle little breath that was not quite a laugh. Not the way a child fears a loud person. The other way. He understood that. The fear of someone whose cruelty never needed to raise its voice. They drove another 15 minutes before the hospital came into view. St. Mary's Psychiatric Center sat on slightly elevated ground, surrounded by cracked walls bleached pale by years of sun. From a distance it looked almost peaceful. A mission-style compound with old trees, weathered white buildings, and a rusted cross still hanging crooked above the chapel roof. But the closer they came, the more neglect showed itself. Broken shutters. Patches of mold creeping up one side of the main ward. Security cameras placed too carefully for a place supposedly underfunded. Amina's hands tightened in her lap. "That gate guard was there when I worked here," she murmured. "The one reading the newspaper. Does he know you? He might remember my face." "Then let me speak." Ismail pulled up to the front visitor entrance and shut off the engine. For one brief second, the heat and silence pressed around them like a test. Then he got out. Amina followed half a step behind. The guard looked up lazily, at first, then more sharply, as Ismail approached. "Yes," he asked. "We came to visit a relative," Ismail said in calm, Wolof-accented French, keeping his tone ordinary. "Her name is Mariam Ba." The guard frowned and turned a dog-eared register toward himself. "What relation, aunt?" The man ran one thick finger down a line of names, then another. "There is no visiting approval for that patient. Can approval be granted today?" Ismail reached into his pocket and took out a folded note. Not a flashy bribe, just enough to suggest inconvenience rather than desperation. The guard glanced at it, then at him. For a second, Ismail thought the money might work. Then the man's expression changed. Too quickly, too carefully. And that told him more than the refusal itself. "I said no," the guard repeated, leaning back in his chair. "Restricted case. Ask administration. Restricted case." Amina lowered her eyes at once. He had confirmed it without meaning to. "Where is administration?" Ismail asked. The guard jerked his chin toward the central building. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and paper. A woman behind a metal desk barely looked up before asking them to write the patient's name. When Ismail did, her fingers paused above the keyboard. Again that tiny pause. Again the wrong kind of caution. "I'm sorry," she said. "No one by that name is admitted here." Ismail's face remained neutral. "The guard just told me she was a restricted case." The woman's expression tightened almost invisibly. "The guard is not authorized to discuss patient matters." "But you are. I'm telling you we have no information to release." He leaned one hand on the desk. Not threateningly. Just enough to make her meet his eyes. "Then call whoever is authorized." She hesitated, then picked up the internal phone. Amina stood a little behind him, silent, but she was watching everything now. The receptionist's shoulder tension, the way she lowered her voice once the call connected, the fact that she did not repeat the patient's name aloud, the glance she gave Amina, brief but searching as if trying to place her. A few minutes later, a woman in a gray habit entered from the inner corridor. Sister Clarice. Time had not softened her. She was in her late 50s, perhaps, tall, spare, with a face that might once have been kind but had long ago trained itself into something controlled and unreadable. Her hands were clean, narrow, and almost elegant. Her voice, when she spoke, was low and smooth enough to make ordinary people lower theirs in return. "How may I help you?" she asked. Ismail turned to face her. "My Aunt Mariam Ba." Her eyes moved over him once quickly, then to Amina, and in that instant Ismail felt Amina go rigid beside him. Recognition. Not complete, perhaps, but enough. "I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding," Sister Clarice said. "We do not discuss patients in a public lobby." "Then let us speak privately." She smiled politely. "Family verification is required." "Do it." I said family verification. The emphasis was deliberate. Amina could feel sweat gathering under her headscarf. Sister Clarice knew she did not belong there as a relative. Perhaps she remembered her, perhaps not by name. But something in her gaze had sharpened. Ismail said, "What documents do you need? National identification proof of relation, legal visitation authority." Sister Clarice folded her hands. "For restricted patients, the process can take time." "How much time?" "That depends. On what?" "On whether the request is genuine." The sentence was mild. The insult inside it was not. Ismail let the silence stretch. Then he asked, "Who decides which patients are restricted?" Sister Clarice's expression did not change. Clinical necessity, or private instruction that landed, just barely. Amina saw it, a flicker in the woman's eyes no wider than a breath. Then it was gone. "You are asking improper questions," Sister Clarice said, "and you are giving prepared answers." The receptionist stared down at her desk. The room felt suddenly smaller. Then from somewhere deeper in the compound, a muffled sound traveled down the corridor. Not loud, but human. Amina turned instinctively toward it, and that single movement betrayed her. Sister Clarice followed her glance. Recognition settled fully this time. "You," she said softly. Amina's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," Ismail said, stepping half a fraction closer. Sister Clarice ignored him. Her gaze stayed on Amina. "You used to work in laundry rotation," she said. "Temporary staff." Amina forced herself to speak. "Only for a short while." "Yes," Sister Clarice said. "And you left without notice." There was no accusation in her tone. That made it worse. Ismail understood immediately that the visit was over. Not because they had failed to get in, because they had now been seen, and anyone protecting the hidden ward would already be deciding what to do with that knowledge. Still, he pushed once more. "I want formal confirmation," he said, looking back at Sister Clarice, "whether a patient named Mariam Ba is housed in this facility." She turned to him at last, and the softness in her face became something colder. "You are not supposed to ask about her." The words came out before she could stop them. A single mistake, but a fatal one. For half a second, everyone in the room knew it. The receptionist froze. Amina stopped breathing. Sister Clarice corrected herself instantly. "I mean, you are not authorized to ask about any patient without proper procedure." But it was too late. Ismail had heard the truth, hidden inside the slip. Not "there is no such patient." Not "you are mistaken." But "you are not supposed to ask about her." He straightened slowly. "Thank you," he said. Sister Clarice's eyes narrowed. "For what?" "For clarifying more than you intended." Without waiting for dismissal, he turned and guided Amina toward the exit. They did not speak until they were back inside the car, with the doors locked. Only then did Amina release the breath she had been holding. "She remembered me," she whispered. "Yes. She'll report this. Yes." Amina turned to him, panic breaking through at last. "Then we have to leave, right now, before they— We are leaving," Ismail said. His voice was calm, but the calm had turned to steel. But not defeated. He started the engine. "What did you hear?" she asked. He pulled away from the gate without haste. "I heard confirmation," he said. "From one sentence, from the wrong sentence." Amina looked back once at the compound receding behind them. The chapel, the walls, the shuttered windows. A place built to contain the minds of the broken, and perhaps also to hide the minds of the stolen. "She said I was not supposed to ask about her," Ismail continued. "That means there is a her." His hands tightened on the wheel. "And it means they know exactly who she is." They reached Dakar before sunset, but neither of them carried the relief of people returning home. The city moved as it always did. Vendors calling from roadside tables, buses groaning through traffic, children weaving between alleys with laughter too light for the weight sitting inside the car. Yet for Ismail and Amina, everything had changed. St. Mary's was no longer a rumor, no longer a poor maid's frightened memory. It had become a place with a hidden patient, a restricted name, and a woman at the center of it whom no one was supposed to ask about. That single sentence from Sister Clarice kept replaying in Ismail's mind. "You are not supposed to ask about her. Not there is no such patient. Not you are mistaken, but her." He parked first at one of his smaller office buildings and waited there until the traffic thinned enough for them to return separately. Amina entered the estate through the service gate. Ismail came through the main entrance, later greeting no one, speaking only when necessary. He did not want the house staff linking their movements together, in a place that large secrets could be protected for years, but small observations could also travel faster than truth. By the time Amina brought a tray to his study, the room was already dark except for the desk lamp and the fading orange light at the windows. Ismail stood over his desk with his sleeves rolled up, staring at a sheet of paper filled with names and arrows. Mama Ismail Diallo, Mariam Ba, Chief Bako Diallo, St. Mary's, Sister Clarice. Amina set the tray down quietly. "Sir." He looked up. The hard stillness in his face had deepened since they left the hospital. "They will be alert now," he said. Amina nodded. "Yes, they saw you. They know someone came asking. And if they inform Bako," she began. "They may move her," Ismail finished. The possibility settled heavily between them. Amina sat only when he told her to, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could still feel the coldness in Sister Clarice's eyes, still remember the smell of the corridor behind the chapel, still hear the distant sounds that seemed to belong to no ordinary hospital. Ismail took a pen and pointed at the rough layout he had drawn from her description. "Show me again." Amina leaned forward. "The front gate opens into administration. General wards to the right, pharmacy to the left. Behind that is the laundry block, and beyond it the chapel. Old cracked walls, mostly unused in daytime. There's a side passage there. That leads to the inner gate. Locked, yes. How many staff at night? Fewer. One guard near the outer yard, one orderly, sometimes moving between the back corridor and the nursing station. Sister Clarice does not stay all night every day, but some nights she returns unexpectedly." He made another note. "And cameras. 2 that I know. One over the laundry path, one near the passage, blind spots." Amina hesitated, then pointed. "Here, along the wall behind the supply room. If the light by the chapel is still dead, that corner stays dark." He studied the drawing for a long time. Then quietly, "We go tonight." Amina's eyes lifted at once. Tonight, yes. Her fear was immediate, but so was understanding. Waiting until morning might mean losing everything. If Baco had already been alerted, he would not sit still. Men who hid living people did not make slow decisions when discovered. They erased evidence. Still, her voice came out thin. "Sir, if they catch us, they won't," he said, though. He did not sound certain. He sounded resolved. Amina lowered her gaze. "You should not go inside." He looked at her sharply. "Why?" "Because they know your face. Maybe not every worker, but enough people do. If they catch you sneaking into a ward, they will make the story about you, not her." He said nothing. Encouraged by that silence, Amina continued. "I know the back paths. I know where the floor creaks near the supply room. I know which window does not close properly. I can move in there better than you. Alone," she swallowed. "I can get in alone. That is not the same as getting out." Amina's fingers tightened. If both of us go in, both of us could be trapped. The truth of it irritated him, because it was true. Ismail turned away and walked toward the window. The sky beyond the glass had darkened to a deep violet. Down in the gardens, lights had begun to glow along the stone path. Everything in his house looked calm, expensive, controlled. Yet somewhere outside the city, his mother might be sitting behind a locked gate like a secret no one was meant to touch. He spoke without turning. "What exactly do you think you can get tonight?" Amina answered carefully. "Proof she is still there. Which room, whether she can walk, whether she knows anything, whether they are preparing to move her." He nodded once. "And if you see her," Amina felt her throat tighten, "then I will tell her that her son is coming." That made him turn back. For the first time since she had spoken to him in the living room, Amina saw something in his face that was not anger, strategy, or suspicion. It was grief stripped of pride. He drew a slow breath. "You do not attempt to bring her out alone. I understand you do not speak to anyone unless you have no choice. Yes, sir. You do not take risks for curiosity." That part she did not answer immediately, because all useful truth now seemed to live inside risk. By 10:30, the house had settled into its night rhythm. Amina changed beneath her wrapper, into dark clothes borrowed from an older maid's son. She tied a black scarf low around her hair and neck. Ismail changed too, leaving behind everything that made him look like the man newspapers recognized. No watch, no polished shoes, no cologne. Just dark trousers, a plain shirt, and a face carrying too much purpose to belong to an ordinary errand. He drove the same old gray sedan, but this time he parked far from the main hospital road, beneath a stand of neglected trees where moonlight broke unevenly through the branches. From there, St. Mary's rose pale and silent in the distance, its walls washed ghost-like under the night sky. Neither spoke much after getting out. The air was warm but dry. Somewhere far off a dog barked, then another answered. The sounds seemed too sharp in the stillness. They moved along the wall, until Amina found the service side path she remembered. Broken crates were still stacked beneath the narrow supply room window. Tall weeds pressed against the lower wall. Rust marked the edges of the frame. She placed her hand against the window. Loose, exactly as before. Ismail handed her a slim phone and a small flashlight. 1 vibration means call me. 2 means I'm already coming in. She nodded. And if I do not hear from you in 20 minutes, I come anyway. Amina looked at him. In the moonlight, his face seemed older, not weaker, just worn by the shape of what he was trying not to imagine. I may need longer, she whispered. Then take longer, he said, but not foolishly. She almost smiled, but fear was too close. Instead, she climbed onto the crate, pushed carefully at the warped frame, and slipped through into the dark. Inside, the supply room smelled of dust bleach and damp cardboard. Shelves lined the walls, crowded with cracked basins, folded linen bottles with torn labels, old ropes, and cleaning brushes stiff with age. Amina waited motionless until her eyes adjusted. No voices, no footsteps, only the distant electric hum of a building that never fully slept. She clicked on the flashlight, once covering most of the beam with her palm, and moved toward the door. Beyond it lay the corridor she remembered. The laundry alcove first, then the long wall leading toward the chapel side room. Her sandals made almost no sound, but her heartbeat seemed loud enough to betray her. Every shadow felt inhabited. Every corner looked like a place where Sister Clarice might suddenly appear. She passed the chapel door and turned into the narrow rear passage. There it was, the inner gate, locked, cold metal bars crossing the corridor like a final decision. Amina stepped closer, listening. At first she heard nothing. Then slowly, something emerged beneath the hum of the lights and the far-off rattle of a trolley. A voice, so weak it barely seemed human at first. A sound worn down by years of sedation, confinement, and unanswered pain. It drifted through the darkness beyond the gate, paused, then came again. Amina froze. Her eyes filled instantly. Because this was no random muttering, no broken nonsense. The voice was calling a name. Ismail. The second time it came, it was shakier, almost swallowed by breath. Ismail, my son. Amina pressed one trembling hand against her mouth to stop herself from crying out. The tears ran anyway. On the other side of that locked gate, somewhere in the darkness, the woman from the photograph was alive and still calling for the son who had buried an empty lie. Ket thuk fan 8. Tiep tuk yukau, viet ju 1000 to 1200, to theo quai jin fan. 9. Amina did not move at first. Her entire body had gone still, as if even breathing too loudly might erase the fragile thread of sound reaching her from beyond the gate. The corridor around her felt colder, now tighter, the air thick with something that was no longer just fear. It was truth, not proven, not documented, but undeniable. She leaned closer to the metal bars, her fingers hovering just above them, afraid to touch in case the faint clink of contact might echo down the hall. The voice came again, fainter this time, dragged through weakness. Ismail. Tears blurred Amina's vision. It's her, she whispered to herself, barely forming the words. It has to be her. But whispers did not open gates. She forced herself to think. This was not the moment to break down. Not yet. If she lost control now, everything would collapse before it even began. She stepped back slowly and scanned the lock. Old, heavy, mechanical, not electronic. That meant keys or force, and force would bring people running. Her eyes moved quickly across the corridor. To the left, a narrow service panel. To the right, a small table with a plastic container and a rusted clipboard. Above, a flickering bulb casting uneven light. No tools, no easy way through. She pressed her palm lightly against the bars this time. Cold, real. The voice on the other side stopped. For a moment, the silence returned, and it felt worse than the sound. Hello, Amina whispered, her voice trembling, despite her effort to keep it steady. Can you hear me? Nothing. Then after a long pause, a faint movement, fabric shifting, and a breath. Who is there? The voice was barely audible, but it was no longer drifting. It was responding. Amina's heart surged. My name is Amina, she said softly. I worked here before. I came back. There was a fragile stillness on the other side, like someone trying to remember how to hold a thought. Amina, the woman repeated weakly. Yes, Amina said quickly. Yes, I'm here. Please, are you all right? A soft, broken sound came in response. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. No one is all right here. The words sent a chill through Amina's spine. She swallowed hard. Do you know your name? A long silence followed. Too long. Then they told me. I am Mariam. Amina closed her eyes briefly. Of course, the false name. They lied, she whispered. A weak rustling sound followed. They lie about many things. Amina leaned closer, her voice shaking now despite all her effort. Do you remember someone named Ismail? The reaction was immediate, not strong, but sharp, like a dying ember suddenly catching a breath of air. Ismail. The woman whispered again, and this time the name carried something deeper, recognition, pain, longing. My son. Amina's knees almost gave way. It was her. There was no more doubt, no more distance between suspicion and reality. Mama Ismail Diallo was alive, trapped, drugged, hidden, and still calling for her child. Amina. The woman's voice came again, thinner now, as if the effort of remembering had taken something from her. Are you from outside? Yes, Amina said quickly. I came from your home, from your son. Another silence, then fragile and trembling. He thinks I am gone. Amina felt tears spill freely now. Yes, she whispered. He was told you died, but he knows now. He sent me. A faint sound of breath on the other side. He came. Not inside, Amina said, but he's here. He will come for you, I promise. For a moment, nothing. Then a quiet, broken sob. 5 years, the woman murmured. They told me. He did not want me. That I had become... shame. Amina clenched her fists against the bars. They lied, she said firmly, her voice stronger now. He never abandoned you. He never knew. The silence that followed felt different. Not empty, not lost. Something inside it had shifted. Hope. But hope in a place like this was dangerous. Footsteps. Faint at first, then clearer. Amina's head snapped toward the corridor behind her. Someone was coming. Her pulse spiked instantly. She stepped back from the gate, her breathing suddenly too loud, too fast. Listen to me, she whispered urgently through the bars. I have to go. I will come back. He will come back. You are not alone anymore. There was movement on the other side, weak, desperate. Don't. Leave. The words nearly broke her, but the footsteps were closer now. Too close. If I stay, they will take me. Too, Amina said, her voice shaking. Please, be strong. A faint hand appeared briefly through the shadows beyond the bars, thin, trembling, reaching without strength. Amina pressed her own hand against the metal where the woman's might have been separated by inches and iron. I promise, she whispered. Then she turned and moved, fast, silent, controlled. The corridor stretched ahead of her like a test she could not afford to fail. Every step had to be exact. Every shadow had to be used. The faint beam of her flashlight remained covered, flickering only when absolutely necessary. She slipped past the chapel wall, past the laundry alcove, just as a figure turned into the far end of the corridor. A night orderly. He paused, frowning slightly, as if he had heard something. Amina flattened herself into the narrow recess beside the supply door, her body pressed into shadow, barely breathing. The man took a few steps forward, glancing down the hall. Amina could see his shoes. Dusty, worn, close enough that one more step would reveal her. He stood there for what felt like forever. Then slowly, he shook his head and turned away. His footsteps faded. Only then did Amina move again. She slipped back into the supply room, closed the door gently behind her, and climbed out through the warped window into the night air. Outside, Ismail was already standing, waiting. The moment she dropped down from the crate, he stepped forward. What happened? He asked, his voice low but urgent. Amina couldn't speak immediately. Her chest rose and fell too fast. Her eyes were still wet, but she forced the words out. She's there. The sentence hit him like a physical blow. You saw her. I didn't see her clearly, Amina said, shaking her head. But I spoke to her. Ismail's entire body went still. You spoke to her. Yes. What did she say? Amina swallowed hard. She remembers you. That was enough to break something inside him. Just slightly, but enough. She thought you abandoned her. Amina continued, her voice trembling. They told her you didn't want her, that she became shame. Ismail turned away, sharply, his jaw tightening as if holding back something violent. They lied to her, Amina said. I told her the truth, that you are coming. Silence, heavy, breathing. Then how long has she been like that? He asked. She said 5 years. Exactly 5 years. No more doubt, no more room for denial. She's weak, Amina added. Drugged. But she's not gone. She knows your name. She knows you're her son. Ismail closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not just anger, not just grief. Decision. They kept her alive to erase her, he said quietly. Not to heal her. Amina nodded. And now they know we came, she added. Yes. They might move her. Yes. The word hung there like a countdown. Ismail looked back at the hospital walls in the distance, then at Amina. We don't wait anymore, he said. What do we do? His voice dropped lower. Now we stop being careful. Amina felt a chill, because the man standing in front of her now was no longer just a son searching for truth. He was a man preparing for war. They did not drive back immediately. For a long moment after Amina spoke, both of them remained beside the car, the night stretching around them, in a silence that no longer felt empty. The hospital walls stood pale in the distance, unchanged, indifferent, hiding everything they had just confirmed. She's alive, Ismail said again, almost to himself. Amina nodded, though her throat was still tight. Yes. The word carried weight now. Not possibility, not hope. Truth. Ismail exhaled slowly and looked at the ground, then back at the building. 5 years. The number sounded different now. Not time passed. Time stolen. They told her you abandoned her, Amina said softly. His jaw tightened. They told me she died, he replied. 2 lies, perfectly aligned. Amina stepped closer, lowering her voice. We don't have time. If they suspect anything, they could move her before morning. I know. He opened the car door but didn't get in yet. Instead, he leaned one hand against the roof, thinking fast now the way he did in negotiations, where one mistake cost millions. Except this time the cost wasn't money. What's the fastest way to get her out? Amina asked. He shook his head slightly. Force. That's dangerous. Yes. But waiting is worse. Yes. The pattern repeated. Every answer leading to the same conclusion. No safe path. Ismail finally got into the driver's seat. Amina followed, closing the door quietly behind her. For a moment, neither of them reached for the seatbelt. Neither turned the key. Listen carefully, he said. Amina straightened. What we do next has to be precise. Not emotional, not rushed. If we fail, they won't just move her. They'll erase everything. Amina nodded slowly. I'm listening. He started the engine but kept the headlights off for a few seconds longer than necessary. First, he said, we confirm how many people control that ward at night. 1 guard, 1 orderly, maybe 2, Amina replied. And Sister Clarice. She might not be there, but she could come. Then we assume worst case. He turned on the headlights and began driving. Second, we create distraction. Amina frowned. What kind of distraction? Something that pulls attention away from the back corridor. Fire alarm, medical emergency, something that forces staff to move. That could cause panic. It needs to. She hesitated. And while they're distracted, we go in. Open the gate, get her out. Amina's breath caught. Sir, that means breaking in. Yes, and if they catch us, they won't. His tone left no space for argument, but Amina still pressed. You don't know that. I know we don't have another chance. That ended it. Silence settled again, but this time it was different. It was the silence of agreement forming, not doubt. When they reached the outskirts of Dakar, Ismail didn't return directly to the mansion. Instead, he drove toward one of his company's logistics yards, a smaller, less monitored property used for storage and temporary transport coordination. The gate guard straightened immediately when he saw him. "Sir, open." Within seconds they were inside. Amina looked around confused. "Why are we here?" Ismail parked near a warehouse and stepped out. "Because I need things I can't take from the house." Inside the warehouse, dim lights revealed stacks of crates, maintenance equipment, and storage lockers. Ismail moved quickly, unlocking a side cabinet and pulling out a small toolkit, gloves, and a compact crowbar. Amina stared. "You've done this before?" "No," he said. "But I've learned to prepare for everything." He handed her a pair of gloves. "You'll need these." She took them slowly. "This is real now," she said. "It was always real." They returned to the car, but before getting in, Ismail stopped. "There's something else." Amina waited. "If anything goes wrong, you leave." She shook her head immediately. "No, that's not a request. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking you to stay for me. And I'm not staying for you," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear in it. "I'm staying for her." That stopped him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ismail gave a small, almost invisible nod. "Then we both leave together," he said. Amina accepted that. They drove back toward St. Mary's again, this time with no hesitation, no pause. The road felt shorter, now sharper, like something pulling them forward instead of warning them away. The night had deepened. Fewer vehicles, less movement. The world shrinking into pockets of darkness and isolated light. When they reached the same hidden spot beneath the trees, Ismail parked without turning off the engine immediately. He looked at Amina. "Once we start, we don't stop." She nodded. "I know." They stepped out. The air felt heavier than before. Not just quiet. Waiting. They moved along the wall again, quicker this time, more direct. No hesitation in their steps, no second guessing. At the service path, Amina stopped briefly. "I'll trigger the distraction from inside," she said. "There's an old electrical panel near the laundry room. If I pull the wrong fuse, it should kill lights in half the building. And alarms, maybe, or at least confusion." "Good." She climbed up first this time without looking back. Inside. Gone. Ismail remained outside. Every sense sharpened, every second stretching longer than it should. Then darkness. Half the hospital lights flickered, then went out. A distant shout echoed from inside the compound. Another voice followed. Footsteps, doors opening, confusion spreading exactly as planned. Ismail moved instantly. He climbed through the window and dropped inside. The corridor was darker now, shadows deeper, sounds louder. Somewhere ahead, Amina's faint light flickered once, then disappeared. He followed, past the laundry alcove, past the chapel wall, then the inner gate. Amina was already there, breathing hard, her hands on the lock. "It's too strong," she whispered. Ismail stepped forward, pulling the crowbar from his side. "Move!" She did. He wedged the metal into the lock seam, his muscles tightening as he forced pressure into the mechanism. For a second, nothing. Then a sharp crack. The lock gave. The gate shifted. Amina grabbed it, pulling it open just enough to slip through. The sound of movement behind them grew louder. "They're coming," she whispered. "I know." They stepped into the hidden corridor. And there, at the far end, a figure, thin, unsteady, standing in the half-dark like someone who had forgotten how to stand, but refused to fall. Amina's breath caught. Ismail stopped completely, because even before he saw her face clearly, he knew. "Mama." The word left him before he could stop it. The woman lifted her head slowly. Her eyes, hollow but searching, found his. And in that instant, 5 years of lies collapsed. "My son," she whispered. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the corridor, not the darkness, not the approaching footsteps echoing somewhere behind them. The world narrowed to a single fragile line between a son and the woman who had been taken from him. Ismail did not move at first. He stood there as if afraid that one step forward might break whatever miracle had allowed this moment to happen. The figure before him looked smaller than he remembered. Thinner, weaker. Her shoulders curved inward as though years had pressed down on her spine. Her headscarf hung loosely, and her clothes, if they could still be called that, were faded, worn, and wrong. But her eyes. Even through exhaustion, even through whatever drugs they had forced into her, her eyes were still his mother's. "Mama," he said again, softer now. Her lips trembled. She took one step forward, then another. Each movement looked like effort, like pain, like something her body had forgotten how to do. "Ismail," she whispered. The sound of his name broke the last barrier inside him. He crossed the distance in seconds. Careful at first, then not careful at all. His hands reached her shoulders, hesitated, then pulled her into him as if trying to confirm she was real, solid, alive. She collapsed into his arms. Not dramatically, not like someone fainting, but like someone who had been holding herself upright for years and finally found a place to rest. "My son," she murmured against his chest. "You came." His throat tightened so hard he could barely speak. "I'm here," he said. "I'm here, Mama, I'm here." Behind them, Amina turned sharply. Footsteps, closer now. Voices raised in confusion. "They're coming," she said urgently. Ismail didn't respond. Not immediately, because letting go even for a second felt impossible. "Mama," he said, trying to steady his voice, "we have to move." She didn't answer. Her fingers clutched weakly at his shirt, as if afraid he would disappear the moment she released him. "They told me you would not come," she whispered. "They lied," he said. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Her breath shuddered. "I waited," she said. "I kept calling." But no one listened. Amina stepped closer, her voice tight with urgency. "Sir, please, we don't have time." That pulled him back. Just enough. Ismail shifted his grip, supporting his mother's weight more firmly. "Can you walk?" he asked. She tried. Her legs trembled immediately. Not from fear, from weakness. "She's been sedated," Amina said. "Her body isn't strong enough." Another shout echoed down the corridor. A door slammed somewhere behind them. "They're checking the back," Amina added. Ismail made the decision instantly. He bent and lifted his mother into his arms. She was lighter than he remembered. Too light, as if the years had been taken from her not just in time, but in flesh. She gasped softly, her hand gripping his shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said. "I've got you." Her head rested against him, her voice barely audible now. "Don't leave me again." "I won't," he said. "Never again." Amina moved ahead of them, guiding the way. This way. They retraced their steps through the narrow corridor, every sound amplified now by urgency. The darkness that had once helped them now felt unstable, shifting with every flicker of failing lights. Behind them, footsteps, faster. "They're coming this way," Amina whispered. Ismail tightened his hold. "How far?" "Less than a minute." They reached the inner gate. Still open, still broken. Amina slipped through first, then turned to help guide Ismail through without hitting the metal frame. "Careful." He moved through, his mother held tightly, her breathing shallow but steady. They stepped back into the outer corridor. Then a voice. "Stop!" Amina froze. Ismail didn't. He moved, fast, toward the supply room, toward the window. "Hey!" another voice shouted. "They're in the back!" Footsteps thundered behind them now. Amina reached the supply room first and pushed the door open. Here, Ismail followed, ducking slightly to avoid hitting the frame with his mother in his arms. Inside the room felt smaller than before. More dangerous, Window Amina said. He moved toward it, but just as he reached the crate, a shadow filled the doorway. The night orderly, breathing hard, eyes wide. "You," the man began. Ismail didn't hesitate. He shifted his weight, turning his body to shield his mother, then drove his shoulder forward. The impact knocked the man backward into the corridor, not violent enough to injure seriously. "But enough. Go," Ismail said. Amina climbed first, pulling herself through the window and dropping outside. Then she turned, reaching up. "Give her to me." Ismail hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Then he lifted his mother, carefully guiding her through the narrow opening. Amina caught her weight awkwardly, lowering her as gently as she could. "Careful, careful." Then Ismail followed, climbing through, just as voices filled the corridor behind them. They went out the window. Outside, the night air hit them like a shock. "Move," Amina urged. Ismail lifted his mother again, ignoring the strain now burning through his arms. They ran, not far, but fast enough. Back along the wall, through the brush, toward the trees where the car waited. Behind them, shouts grew louder. A flashlight beam cut across the outer yard. "They're coming out," Amina said. "I see them." They reached the car. Ismail opened the back door first, carefully lowering his mother onto the seat. Amina slid in beside her, supporting her head. "Go." He was already moving. Engine on, lights on, tires grinding briefly against loose dirt before catching the road. They pulled away, just as two figures emerged from the hospital gate shouting and pointing. But they were too late. The car gained speed, the distance widened, and within seconds, St. Mary's Psychiatric Center began to shrink behind them, its walls returning to silence, as if nothing had ever happened. Inside the car, the only sound was breathing. Heavy, uneven, real. Amina adjusted her position, holding Mama Aisatu gently. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." The older woman's eyes fluttered open slightly. She looked at Amina, then at Ismail in the front seat. Her lips moved. "Home," she murmured. Ismail's grip on the wheel tightened. "Yes," he said, "we're going home." But even as he said it, something else settled into his mind. This was not over, not even close, because men like Bako did not lose quietly, and somewhere behind them in the dark, a machine built on lies had just been broken open. It would not stay silent. They did not drive to the mansion. That decision came before the gates of St. Mary's had even disappeared in the rearview mirror. Ismail knew better than to return directly to the one place everyone would expect him to go, if Chief Bako had even the slightest suspicion. And now there was no reason to doubt it. Then the Diallo estate would already be watched. Instead, Ismail took a narrow turn off the main road, then another, guiding the car deeper into a quieter part of the city where older houses stood, behind low walls and unmarked gates. The streets were dim-lit only by scattered bulbs and the occasional flicker of a television behind half-open windows. Amina held Mama Aisatu in the back seat, one arm wrapped around her shoulders to keep her from sliding with every turn. The older woman's breathing remained shallow but steady, her head resting against Amina's shoulder as if she had no strength left to hold it up on her own. "She's very weak," Amina said softly. "I know," Ismail replied, his eyes fixed on the road. "We need a doctor. We will get one." "But not at the hospital," Amina added quickly. "No," he said. "Not at any place they can reach." They drove another 10 minutes before Ismail slowed in front of a plain iron gate. There was no sign, no guard, nothing to mark the place as important. But when he pressed the horn twice in a short pattern, a light flicked on inside the courtyard. A man appeared, older, lean, careful in his movements. He opened the gate without asking questions. Ismail drove in. "This is someone you trust?" Amina asked quietly. "Yes." The car stopped near a small house set at the back of the compound. The man approached as Ismail stepped out. "Ismail," he said, his voice low but steady. "It has been a long time." "Not long enough," Ismail replied. "I need your help, Dr. Mensah." The name settled into Amina's memory immediately. Dr. Kofi Mensah, the same man Ismail had mentioned earlier, the former hospital doctor. He looked past Ismail into the car, and then he saw her. Everything in his face changed. "My God," he whispered. He moved quickly to the back door, opening it carefully. "Mama Isa too," he said under his breath. Amina felt a chill. "You know her." Dr. Mensah didn't answer at first. He simply leaned closer, examining her face, her pulse, her breathing. "Yes," he said finally. "I know exactly who this is." Ismail stepped closer. "Then you know what they did." Dr. Mensah looked at him, and in that look there was no denial, only something heavy. "Yes," he said quietly. "I know enough. They carried her inside. The house was simple but clean. A narrow bed had already been prepared, as if the doctor had expected emergencies to arrive without warning. Amina helped lay Mama Isatu down, while Dr. Mensah moved quickly, checking her eyes, her pulse, the condition of her arms. "She's been heavily sedated for a long time," he said. "The dosage is inconsistent, enough to weaken her, not enough to kill her." "Can you help her?" Ismail asked. Dr. Mensah paused, then nodded. "Yes, but it will take time. Time we may not have." The doctor met his gaze. "Then we make time." Amina stepped back, watching them, her hands trembling slightly, now that the urgency of escape had passed. The fear hadn't left, it had only changed shape. "Will they come here?" she asked. Ismail didn't answer immediately. "They will look," he said. "But they won't start here." "Why not?" "Because this place is invisible to them," he replied. Dr. Mensah gave a faint, grim smile. "That used to be true," he said. "Let's hope it still is." He prepared an injection, then hesitated briefly before administering it. "This will help stabilize her," he explained. "Not sedate, stabilize." Mama Isatu stirred slightly, her lips moving. "Ismail." "I'm here," he said, stepping closer to the bed. Her eyes opened just enough to find him. "You came. I told you I would." She studied his face as if trying to memorize it again. "They said, you would forget me." "I never forgot you," he said. "They made me believe you were gone." Her gaze softened, then dimmed again as the medicine began to take effect. She drifted into sleep. A real sleep this time. Not the heavy, forced stillness of the hospital. Amina exhaled slowly. "She looks peaceful," she said. "For the first time in years," Dr. Mensah replied. The room fell quiet. Then Ismail turned. "You said you know enough," he said to the doctor. "Tell me everything." Dr. Mensah didn't answer immediately. He removed his gloves, washed his hands slowly, then dried them with care. Only then did he speak. "I worked at St. Mary's 3 years ago," he said. "I was assigned briefly to the restricted ward." Amina leaned forward slightly. "What did you see?" Dr. Mensah's jaw tightened. "Patients who were not mentally ill," he said. "Not in the way the records claimed. Some were confused, yes, but from medication, not illness. Others were completely aware, just weakened." "Why keep them there?" Amina asked. "For control," he said. "For silence." Ismail's voice dropped, and my mother, Dr. Mensah, looked at him directly. She was one of the strongest. The words landed with weight. "What do you mean?" She resisted. The doctor said. She questioned everything. She refused to sign documents. She demanded to see her son. Ismail's hands curled into fists. And they called her unstable. Yes. Who? Dr. Mensah hesitated. Then, a man came often, he said. Not staff, not official, but everyone treated him as if he had authority. Ismail didn't need to ask, but he did anyway. Who? Dr. Mensah met his eyes. Chief Ismail Diallo. Silence. Heavy. Final. Amina felt it settle like a stone in her chest. There it was. No more guessing. No more doubt. Ismail didn't react immediately. Not outwardly. But something inside him shifted. Deep. Permanent. What did he want from her, he asked. Signatures, Dr. Mensah replied. Control over assets. Legal authority. And when she refused, they labeled her unstable, the doctor said. Declared her mentally unfit. Moved her to restricted care. Amina covered her mouth. They buried someone else, she whispered. Yes, Dr. Mensah said. Someone who could not be identified easily. The room felt smaller, darker, more dangerous. They planned everything, Ismail said. Yes, for years, yes. A long silence followed. Then Amina spoke. What happens now? Dr. Mensah looked at Ismail. That depends on him. Ismail stood still for a moment. Then he turned back to the bed. To his mother. To the woman who had been erased, hidden, silenced, and had still held on to his name. When he spoke, his voice was no longer uncertain. No longer searching. It was clear. Cold. And final. Now, he said, we end this. Morning came slowly to Dr. Mensah's compound, but none of them felt rested. Amina had not slept at all. She had remained by the bedside through the night, adjusting the thin blanket over Mama Aissatou, wiping her forehead gently when fever threatened to rise, and watching each breath as if counting them could somehow keep them steady. Every time the older woman stirred, Amina leaned closer, listening, hoping to hear something more than fragments, something stronger than the broken whispers of memory. Ismail had not slept either, but unlike Amina, he had not stayed still. He moved between rooms in quiet, controlled steps, making calls from the secondary phone, writing notes, pulling files from memory and aligning them with what he now knew. Every detail of the past 5 years was being re-examined, not emotionally but strategically, because now it was no longer about rescue. It was about exposure. By the time the sun rose fully, the air in the compound had shifted from fear to preparation. Dr. Mensah stepped into the room, carrying a small tray of medicine. He checked Mama Aissatou's pulse again, then nodded slightly. She's stabilizing, he said. Amina exhaled in relief. Will she wake up properly today? Maybe briefly, he said. But her body needs time to recover from prolonged sedation. Ismail stood near the doorway. Can she speak for short periods? That's enough. Dr. Mensah looked at him carefully. You're thinking ahead. I have to. The doctor set the tray down. Then listen to me carefully, he said. If you push her too soon, you risk losing clarity. What you need from her testimony, recognition, memory must come when her mind is steady. Ismail nodded once. I understand. Amina looked between them. You're not just planning to hide her, she said. No, Ismail replied. You're planning to expose everything. Yes. The word settled heavily in the room, because exposure meant danger. Not just for him, for all of them. Amina lowered her voice. If Bako finds out, he will, Ismail said. Then he won't wait. I know. Dr. Mensah stepped closer. He has influence, the doctor said. Money, connections. If this becomes public without preparation, he can twist the narrative. That's why it won't be unprepared, Ismail replied. He turned and walked to the small table near the window, picking up a folder he had assembled overnight. Everything he did depended on silence, he continued, on control, on the assumption that no one would question the past. He opened the folder. Now we remove all 3. Amina moved closer, looking down at the documents. "What is this?" "Records," he said. "Old trust transfers, signature timelines, medical reports from the period before her death." "You had all this." "I had pieces," he said. "Now I know where they fit." Dr. Mensah watched him. "You're building a case." "I'm building truth," Ismail replied. The doctor gave a faint nod. "Then you need more than documents." "I know. You need witnesses." Amina looked up. "Like you." Dr. Mensah hesitated, then said quietly, "Yes." The word carried weight, because it meant stepping into the open, risking everything. "Are you willing?" Ismail asked. The doctor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Mama Aissatou, at the woman lying on the bed. Her breathing shallow but steady, her face. Finally at peace after years of forced silence. "They took her voice," he said slowly. "And they expected the rest of us to forget we ever heard it." He looked back at Ismail. "I'm willing." Amina felt a surge of something close to hope. For the first time, this was no longer just survival. It was becoming justice. But justice had a cost. A soft movement came from the bed. All three turned instantly. Mama Aissatou's fingers twitched. Her eyes opened slowly. This time they were clearer. Not fully, but clearer than before. "Ismail," she whispered. He moved to her side immediately. "I'm here." Her gaze found him, stayed. For a moment she simply looked, as if confirming that this was not another illusion, not another trick of the mind. "You came back," she said. "I never left," he replied softly. "They kept us apart." Her eyes filled with tears. "They told me I was sick, that I imagined everything." "You weren't," he said. "You were right." She swallowed weakly. "Bako," she murmured. The name changed the air. "What did he do?" Ismail asked gently. Her hand moved slightly, reaching. He took it. "He brought papers," she said. "After your father's land, after your business began. He said it was for protection, for management." Her breathing grew uneven. "Take your time," Amina said softly. But Mama Aissatou shook her head faintly. "No. Listen." Her grip on Ismail's hand tightened weakly. "I refused," she said. "I told him, everything stays for my son. Everything." Ismail felt his chest tighten. "And then?" he asked. Her eyes darkened. "He changed," she whispered. "He stopped smiling, stopped calling me sister." A pause. "Then they gave me medicine." Amina closed her eyes. "Of course. They said it was for stress," Mama Aissatou continued. "But it made my thoughts slow, heavy." Her voice trembled. "I told them something was wrong, but they said I was confused." Dr. Mensah stepped closer, listening carefully. "They built the illness around her," he said quietly. Mama Aissatou nodded weakly. "Yes." She looked at Ismail again. "I tried to tell you," she said. "Before your trip, I tried." He felt something break inside him. "I should have listened," he whispered. "You trusted family," she said. "That is not a crime." The words hit deeper than anything else, because they were true. Her eyes began to close again, but she forced them open. "They took me at night," she said. "I woke up, not in my room, not in my home." Her breath caught. "In that place, St. Mary's." Amina's hands trembled. "They said I was dangerous," Mama Aissatou continued, "that I must be kept away." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They buried someone else." Silence, complete, final. That was the truth. Spoken, alive, not rumor, not suspicion. Fact. Ismail closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something inside him had settled completely. No more doubt, no more hesitation. "Mama," he said softly, "you're safe now." Her fingers tightened slightly around his. "Don't let them," she whispered. "I won't." Her eyes closed again. This time she did not force them open. She slept, real sleep. Amina stepped back, wiping her tears. She told us everything she said. Yes, Ismail replied. Dr. Mensah nodded slowly. That's enough to begin. But Ismail shook his head. No, he said. It's enough to finish. He looked at both of them. We don't hide anymore. Amina felt her heart race. What are you going to do? Ismail's voice was calm. Too calm. I'm going to bring this into the light, and Bako, he held her gaze, will face what he created. Outside, the morning had fully arrived, but inside that small house something much larger had begun. Not just truth, not just justice, reckoning. By midday the first move was made. Not in public, not yet. Ismail understood something that men like Bako often forgot. Power was not just about who spoke loudest in the open. It was about who controlled the moment when truth entered the room. And that moment had to be chosen carefully. He did not go to the police. He did not go to the press. He went to the board. The Diallo Group headquarters stood tall in central Dakar, its glass facade reflecting the bright afternoon sun. Inside, everything functioned with precision, executives moving between meetings, assistants carrying files, quiet conversations behind closed doors. It was a world built on order, reputation, and control. The same world Bako believed he understood. The same world Ismail was about to break open. At exactly 2 p.m., an emergency board meeting was called. No agenda was shared. That alone was enough to create tension. Senior executives gathered quickly, their expressions cautious. Among them were longtime partners, legal advisors, financial controllers, people who had watched Ismail build his empire and who respected him, not just for his wealth, but for his discipline. At 2:07 p.m., Chief Bako Diallo arrived. He walked in with his usual calm authority, dressed immaculately, his expression composed, but his eyes were sharper than before. He had heard something. Not everything, but enough to know that something had shifted. He took his seat without greeting anyone. At 2:10 p.m., Ismail entered. The room fell silent instantly. There was something different about him. Not louder, not angrier, just resolved. He did not sit immediately. Instead, he stood at the head of the table, looking at each person in the room, one by one, not quickly, not nervously, deliberately. Then he spoke. Thank you for coming on short notice. No one responded. No one needed to. I'm aware this is unusual, he continued, but what I am about to present requires immediate attention. He nodded toward the legal advisor, who dimmed the lights slightly as a screen came to life at the front of the room. A file appeared, then another, then a timeline. 5 years ago, Ismail said my mother, Mama Aissatou Diallo, was declared dead. Bako did not move, not a single muscle. That death, Ismail continued, was accepted by all of us, processed, mourned, closed. A pause. Then it was a lie. The room shifted, subtle but unmistakable. A few executives leaned forward slightly. Others exchanged quick glances, but no one spoke. Ismail clicked the remote. A document appeared on the screen. Medical reports from the final days before her death, he said. Notice the signatures. Another click. Now compare them to these. A second set of documents. Subtly different, but enough. The legal advisor frowned. That's not consistent, he murmured. No, Ismail said. It isn't. Another click. A financial record appeared. Payments from a legacy trust, KD Family Welfare, over the last 5 years. Another click. Transferred to St. Mary's Psychiatric Center. The room went completely still. Bako's fingers tightened slightly on the table. Still calm, still silent, but no longer untouched. Ismail turned toward him. Would you like to explain that, uncle? The word landed differently now, not with respect, with exposure. Bako leaned back slightly. I don't know what you're implying, he said smoothly. You do, Ismail replied. No, Bako said. What I see is a series of documents taken out of context. Then provide the context. Bako smiled faintly. This is not how serious matters are handled, Ismail. If you have concerns, we discuss them privately. No, Ismail said. The word cut through the room. We discuss them here. Another click. The screen changed. This time a photograph, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. Mama Isa too, alive, in St. Mary's. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, shock. One of the board members stood halfway up from his chair. Yes, Ismail said. That is my mother. Silence crashed down, heavy, irreversible. Bako's composure cracked, just slightly, but enough. That proves nothing. He said, though his voice had lost its earlier smoothness. Old image. Fabrication. She spoke this morning, Ismail interrupted. That stopped everything. She spoke, he repeated, and she confirmed everything. Bako's eyes hardened. This is madness. No, Ismail said. This is truth. He stepped closer to the table. You drugged her, he said. Declared her unstable, removed her, replaced her. That is an accusation without what Ismail cut in. Without Fierce room was no longer neutral. It had shifted. Toward him, Bako saw it. He stood slowly. You are making a mistake, he said, his voice lower, now more dangerous. You are letting emotion destroy reason. No, Ismail said. I am letting truth destroy lies. Bako's gaze swept the room, looking for allies, for doubt, for hesitation. He found none, because the evidence was no longer abstract. It had a face, a voice, a living witness. You think this ends here? Bako said quietly. No, Ismail replied. It ends with you. The words hung in the air. Final, complete. At that moment, the door opened. Two men entered. Not security, not staff, police. The room shifted again, this time decisively. Chief Ismail Diallo, one of the officers, said, You are under investigation for fraud, unlawful confinement, and identity falsification. Bako did not move. For a second it seemed as though he might still speak, still argue, still control the room. But then, something in his expression changed. Not fear, not regret, recognition that this time he had lost. He looked at Ismail. Long, steady. You should have left this buried, he said. Ismail met his gaze. You should have left her alive. That was the end. The officer stepped forward, and for the first time in years, Ismail Diallo was no longer the man controlling the room. He was the man being taken out of it. The door closed behind him. Silence remained. Then slowly, breath returned. Movement returned. Reality returned. One of the executives spoke quietly. Is she really alive? Ismail answered without hesitation. Yes. And now? He looked toward the window, toward the city, toward the life that had almost been stolen completely. Now he said, we bring her home. The house felt different before they even entered. Not because anything had changed physically. The marble floors still reflected the chandeliers, the tall windows still framed the ocean. The staff still moved quietly through the corridors, but because something that had been missing for 5 years had finally crossed the threshold again. Life. Real life. Not routine, not performance, not silence dressed as peace. When Ismail carried his mother into the mansion that evening, every step echoed with something deeper than sound. Amina walked beside him, one hand gently steadying Mama Isatu's shoulder, her heart beating fast, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what this moment meant. The staff froze. No one had been told. No announcement had been made. And yet, everyone understood, because the woman in Ismail's arms was not a stranger. She was memory. She was history. She was the name that still lived quietly in the house, even when no one spoke it aloud. Mama, Ibrahim whispered, stepping forward slowly, disbelief trembling in his voice. Mama Isatu's eyes opened slightly at the sound. Recognition flickered. "Ibrahim," she murmured. The old man's knees nearly gave way. "She remembers," Amina whispered. "Yes," Ismail said softly. "She remembers." They brought her to the east wing, to the room that had been locked for 5 years. Ismail paused at the door, the key already in his hand. For a brief second his breath caught. This room had been a shrine, a place of grief, of finality. Now it was something else. He opened the door. The scent of time greeted them again, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt waiting. They laid her on the bed carefully, the same bed she had once slept in, the same space that had held her absence, now holding her return. Dr. Mensah had arrived earlier and prepared what he could: clean sheets, light medicine, water, a small tray of food that might be tolerated once her strength returned. Amina adjusted the pillow gently. "Rest," she said softly. Mama Aisatu looked around the room, slowly, her gaze moving from the window, to the dresser, to the chair where her shawl still lay. Her fingers trembled slightly. "Home," she whispered. "Yes," Ismail said, kneeling beside her. "You're home." Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, but this time they were not from pain, they were from release. Days passed, not quickly, not dramatically. Healing did not move like that. It came in small things, in breaths that grew steadier, in sleep that no longer fought the body, in moments when memory returned without confusion. Amina remained by her side more than anyone else, not because she was told to, but because she chose to. She helped her sit up when her strength allowed it, fed her small portions of soup, wiped her hands gently, spoke to her softly when the past became too heavy. "You saved me," Mama Aisatu said one morning, her voice still weak but clearer than before. Amina shook her head. "No," she said. "I only told the truth. That is what saves people," the older woman replied. Ismail changed too, not suddenly, but deeply. The man who had once moved through his own house like a visitor now stayed. He spent time in rooms he had avoided, sat beside his mother without speaking when words were not needed, listened, really listened when she spoke, even if her sentences came slowly, even if they repeated. "I missed 5 years," he said one evening. She looked at him gently. "You were given 5 years of lies," she replied. "Now you have the rest of your life for truth." He lowered his head slightly. That was the kind of answer only she could give. The investigation moved forward, quietly at first, then with force. Bako's network began to unravel piece by piece. Financial records exposed, staff questioned, documents re-examined. The system that had kept Mama Aisatu hidden began to collapse under its own weight. There were others, not many, but enough. People who had been labeled unstable when they were inconvenient, removed when they resisted, silenced when they refused to sign. They were found, not all alive, but enough. Enough to prove that this was never an accident, never a misunderstanding. It had been control, greed, calculated cruelty. And now it was over. Weeks later, the house felt warmer, not in temperature, in presence. Laughter returned in small, careful ways. Conversations stretched longer. The kitchen smelled like food again, not prepared for efficiency, but for comfort. One afternoon, Mama Aisatu sat by the window wrapped in a soft cloth watching the ocean. Amina stood nearby folding laundry. "Come sit," Mama Aisatu said. Amina hesitated. "I should finish this first." "It can wait," she said. Amina sat. For a moment, they simply watched the waves. "You remind me of myself," Mama Aisatu said. Amina smiled faintly. "I am not that strong." "You are," she replied. "You just don't know it yet." Amina lowered her eyes. "You changed everything," the older woman continued. "No," Amina said again. "I only spoke." And that, Mama Aisatu said softly, is how everything begins. Across the room, Ismail watched them. Quiet, present, no longer alone, and for the first time in years, he felt something he had not allowed himself to feel. Peace, not perfect, not complete, but real. He stepped closer. "Mama," he said. She turned. "Yes. There is something I want to ask." She waited. He glanced briefly at Amina, then back at her. "I don't want this house to feel empty again," he said. Her eyes softened. "It won't," she replied. He nodded, but there was more. He turned to Amina. "You don't have to stay here as staff anymore," he said. "You can choose something else. Study, work differently, live freely." Amina looked at him, then at Mama Isatu, then back at him. "I will stay," she said. Why, she smiled gently. "Because this is not just your home anymore." Silence followed. But it was a good silence. A full one. A healed one. Outside, the ocean continued its endless rhythm. Inside, something broken had been restored. Not perfectly, not without scars, but honestly. And that was enough. Some truths do not disappear when they are buried. They wait. They wait in silence, in hidden places, in the quiet strength of people who refuse to forget. And sometimes all it takes to bring them back into the light is one voice, one person brave enough to say, "This is not right." Amina was not powerful. She had no money, no influence, no protection. But she had something stronger, honesty without fear, and that honesty changed everything. Ismail had power, but power alone could not save his mother. It was truth, courage, and the willingness to face pain that brought justice. And Mama Isatu, she endured what no one should ever endure. Yet even in darkness, she held on to one thing: her love for her son. That love became the thread that led him back to her. This story reminds us of something deeply human. Silence protects injustice, truth exposes it, and love is what gives us the strength to fight for both. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever witnessed something wrong but stayed silent? Or have you ever been the voice that changed everything? Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? And if you believe in stories that carry truth, justice, and healing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes the next story you hear might be the one that changes someone's life. Ja Juan Takichban.